Welcome back to our Net Learning series on fast food presented by Employee Wellness and the Wellness Center. Today's presentation is on fast food and diabetes. We want to look at some of the statistics. We want to talk about how fast food may affect persons with diabetes, and to, again, as we've talked about in earlier presentations, to see if this fits and potentially how it can fit. Let's take a second to look back at our important things to remember. We covered this in the first presentation, but it's always a good review to look back at these numbers. In the course of a day, most people are going to need approximately 1,500 to 2,500 calories. Remember, we talked about this being based on several variables, including our height and weight, our activity level, our age, our gender, whether we're trying to gain weight or lose weight or stay the same weight. And so it's going to be different for everybody, but this is going to give us a good estimation. We said that we needed approximately 30 to 100 grams of fat per day. Of that 30 to 100 grams, we wanted 10 grams or less of that to be from saturated fat. So we're really looking to minimize saturated fat. Trans fat, same story. We want to minimize that as much as possible. We're looking for 65 to 100 grams of protein in the course of a day. We said that we want 2 to 4 grams of sodium per day, which would be the same thing as 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams, because remember, we said when we look at food labels, when we look at nutrition information, we're generally going to see the number of milligrams in the food, not the number of grams. And then we want to have approximately 25 to 40 grams of fiber per day. Okay, so it's important that we have an idea or an understanding of these numbers. Again, these are a range, but they do cover a large portion of the population. And so it's good to have these numbers as a reference as we look at some of the numbers throughout the presentations. If we look at our first graph, you can see this is obesity trends among United States adults. This is from 1994. You can see that obesity is defined as a BMI or body mass index of greater than or equal to 30. You can see the United States and the states that are colored in the blue and darker blue shades. We can see what those colors indicate on the bottom, with the less than 10%, the 10 to 14%, and the 15 to 19%. So as the shade of blue gets darker, you can see that increases the portion of that state that is considered obese based on BMI of greater than or equal to 30. So in our first one, you can see from 1994, obviously we want to jump to North Carolina, and we can see that is unfortunately in the 15 to 19%, which would be the highest percentage at this point in time. If we move to the year 2000, what you can look at this point now is that not only have we gone from 15 to 19%, you can see that we've added a greater than 20%. So the light yellow color will represent a state that's got approximately or greater than 20% of its population considered obese, again by our same criteria of a BMI or body mass index greater than 30. So you can see it, this is from the year 2000, so we fast forward from 1994 to 2000. Unfortunately, what we can also notice is that we've got only one state that's still the same from our previous slide that we've looked at in the lighter blue shade. You can see a lot of the eastern United States and the southeastern United States is now the greater than 20% obesity in that state. So again, if we want to flash back for just a second to take a look, here's 1994, no yellow, only blue. Here's 2000. Now we've got almost half of the United States in the yellow shade. So that was 6 years different. So let's just look 1 year ahead. So let's go to the year 2001. And what did you notice that happened? Here's 2000. Here's 2001. And that's right, we've added a new category. So now we've got greater than 25% of the population of that state being obese, defined as a BMI or body mass index of greater than or equal to 30. You can look in 2001, again, if we want to look at North Carolina, you can see that it's holding on to the 20 to 24%. So it's not in the greater than 25% category, still holding on in the yellow shade. So that is our look at 2001. If we move on to 2002, you can see that we haven't added any new categories. Still greater than 25% is the highest one, but you can see that we have added states into that category. And then the other thing that you'll notice is 95% of from the middle of the United States east is now either the new orange shade or the yellow shade of the state. So you can see that a higher percentage or portion of the states have moved up. Again, if we want to go back for just a second to 2001, and there's 2001, there's 2002. We've also lost our Colorado from our light blue to the deeper blue. And then again, we've added a couple of states into the higher category. So let's go and look at another year. So this is 2003. Again, you can see that more of the United States has turned to the yellow shade. We can see that we've added to the red category, and the blue is swiftly fading from the map of the United States. North Carolina again continues to hang on to the same shade it's been for the past couple of years, which is maintaining in this instance would be considered a good thing, as some of the other states are moving into that greater than 25% of the population category. All right, so let's continue on to 2004. And if you'll notice, probably the first thing that you notice is the addition of a lot of the red to the United States. So if we look back, there's 2003. At that time, you can see that there were 4 states that were shaded in the highest category. In 2004, you can see we added a lot of states in there, from Tennessee, Alabama, and really from Texas moving east. We've added a lot into that greater than 25% category. Additionally, you can see the western side of the United States, all but 3 states now are in the 20 to 24% category. And so again, the United States as a whole continues to increase its level of obesity. Moving on from 2004 to 2005, what's the first thing that jumped out at you? Maybe a couple of different things here. We have got the fact that a lot of the eastern United States, the portions of the country from Texas east, a lot of that area is now in that red, that 25 to 29% category. The other thing that may have jumped out at you is that we've added a new category. Okay, so the deeper red is now greater than 30%, whereas before we had the 25 to 29% was the highest, or greater than 25% was the highest. Now we've added a new category, greater than or equal to 30% of that state being considered obese. Another possible thing that could have jumped out at you is the western half of the United States, with the exception of Colorado, is now completely shaded in the 20 to 24% in that yellow color. And again, so moving from 2004 to 2005, the United States, state by state, and the country as a whole is continuing to increase the prevalence of obesity. So moving from 2005 to 2006, again you can see the addition of more of the deeper colors, the red, the orange, just increasing the number by state. You can see we've also, if you look in 2005, North Carolina was in the 25 to 29%. You can see in 2004, North Carolina was in the 20 to 24%, so it jumped from 2004 to 2005, and then again still in that category in 2006. So you may not be from North Carolina, so you may be following another state or other states where you have family or friends, relatives. So it is interesting to look at state by state as well as the country as a whole. So now we'll move on to 2007. So now we will move on to 2007. You can see the pattern continues as the states get more of the deeper, the orange and the red colors. The blue, there's one blue state at this point, 15 to 19%. The rest are at least greater than 20%, and then more and more getting into the 25 to 29% and the greater than 30 category. So if we reflect, that was from 2007. If we look at a couple different periods of time, 1990 to 1998 to 2007, I mean, you can see how the country has shifted as a whole to being heavier as a nation, as well as individual states within the United States. So it's interesting to look at this from 1990, where the highest that we have at that point in time is 10 to 14%. There are a few states in there that we don't have any data for, but at that point the highest is 10 to 14%. In 1998, we have increased up to the 20 to 24%, but there's few of those as a whole in 1998, and then especially moving forward to 2007, where you can see that the majority of the United States are in the top two categories, the 25 to 29%, as well as the greater than 30% category, again meaning 30% or more of that state would be considered obese based on the definition of obesity of a BMI or body mass index of greater than 30. So let's keep going. If you look at this graph, the chart here, it says numbers in millions of diagnosed diabetes cases from 1980 to 2006. So looking at the diagram, you can see from 1980 there were just under 6 million diagnosed cases of diabetes. It slightly goes up. You can see 1982, 84, 86, 1988, 1990. And then around 1994, 96, you can see there starts to begin a very consistent and steady incline in the number of diagnosed cases of diabetes. You can see in 2006, there's a little over 16 million diagnosed cases of diabetes. The estimates are that that's about half of the total number of diabetes cases, that there's about half undiagnosed and about half that are actually diagnosed. And so if we consider what we've just looked at in our graphs, you can see the trend that is obesity has increased in the United States over the course of those years. So have the number of diagnosed diabetes cases in the United States as well. So there's obviously a link with obesity and diabetes. And so, it's important to keep that in mind. Obviously, we want to strive for a healthier weight for a lot of reasons, but definitely as the potential for diabetes will increase as obesity increases. If we look at North Carolina, and you can pull information from any state. This is from 2005. You can see we've got percentage of adults greater than 20 years old with diabetes. Again, in a similar format, the percentages or the numbers are different, but generally the deeper or darker the color becomes, we've got an increased percentage of that population with diabetes. So we've got North Carolina, we've got the counties outlined, and then the color scheme to go along with it. So you can look at North Carolina, you can look at Watauga County, or you can look at other counties that you may be from, or again have family, friends, relatives, and you can look at the percentages. You can see that kind of the northeastern portion of North Carolina is the one with most of the higher category, the 12 to 14.6. But you can see that it's varied throughout the state. So what's important for diabetes management? Nutrition is obviously a factor. We want to look at what we're eating, maybe what we're not eating, and see what we can do from that perspective. Blood glucose monitoring is probably your most important aspect of diabetes. We want to check our blood sugars regularly. We want to know what our ranges should be, and then we want to strive for those ranges and to make modifications in our day, whether it's with nutrition or exercise or medication, to stay in our glucose goals. But if we don't monitor, then we don't know how we're doing. So we definitely need to monitor that. Some other aspects here: we want to keep regular foot exams, foot checks. Same thing with our eye care and eye exams. We want to do those on a regularly scheduled basis. Obviously, our medications are important. We want to keep those in the regular pattern and as prescribed. Exercise is another important variable here. We can't emphasize the effect of physical activity on our blood sugar, as well as our overall health and wellness. And so all these things are important in the grand scheme of things as far as controlling diabetes is concerned. If we just take a little quiz, you can see which uses the most calories. So if you have a sheet of paper or can find one, this is a fun activity. We just talked about the importance of exercise. With our fast food, we've talked about numbers of calories in different areas. And so if we are exercising or thinking about becoming engaged in an exercise program, let's take a look at some of these things or these activities. And let's try to put them in order as far as what uses the most calories. Let's list that first to which uses the least calories. So you can see our options of gardening, golfing while we're walking, tennis, jogging, golfing using a cart, running, swimming, and weight training. So go ahead on a sheet of paper and just jot your answers down. And so let's take a look at how your answers compared with what the correct answer is. Number one, we have running. How many of us got running for number one? Second is jogging. Third is swimming. Number 4 is weight training. 5 is tennis. 6 is gardening. 7 is golf while we're walking. And 8 is golf using a cart. Now, we could argue with any of these that it's based on intensity, which would be a correct and good argument. But if we assume for the most part that everything's the same unless the nature of the event indicates otherwise, number 1 is running. The difference between running and jogging would be the intensity. So we make the assumption that running by nature is going to be a higher intensity exercise than jogging. The higher the intensity, the more calories we're going to use, and so running is number 1 and higher than jogging on that category. Number 3 is swimming, and a lot of times people will put swimming. How many of you guys had swimming down? There's the difference between swimming and 1 and 2, which is running and jogging, is that swimming is not a weight-bearing activity. Now, this is not to say that swimming is bad, because it's definitely not. In fact, it's good sometimes for people with arthritis or joint conditions where it's painful to exercise, to be able to exercise in an environment that's not weight-bearing. So it definitely gives a benefit to some people, but by nature of being a non-weight bearing activity, it is going to use less calories than running and jogging. Number 4 is weight training. Number 5 is tennis. Both of these activities are interval in nature, where we start, we do the activity, and then we stop, pause, do the activity again. So interval by nature, generally we're going to assume is different than 1, 2, and 3, which are going to be continuous exercises. Number 6 is gardening. Obviously, there can be a lot of variation here based on how long you're there and what you're doing. As a whole, gardening is number 6 on the list. And then number 7 and 8, we've got golf while we're walking, and then golf using a cart. And obviously, if we're going to walk, that would be a better calorie burning activity than using the cart. As far as going back to diabetes, you can see this is a picture of our old food guide pyramid. It says, where are the carbs? We know that carbs are important for people with diabetes, especially in the control and regulation of blood sugar. So where are the carbohydrates in the food guide pyramid? Let's see what we guess. Grains, beans, starchy vegetables. Did we get that one? What's next? Fruit. What's next? Milk. You may be wondering about the vegetables. You can see that we had the grains, the beans, the starchy vegetables, the fruit, the milk, and then the fat, sweets, and alcohol. You may be wondering about the vegetables. Vegetables do have carbohydrates in them, but they're very minimal. There's a small amount, especially for the amount of food that you get by volume. So though vegetables do have carbohydrates, when we're looking at them from a substantial amount, we're looking at the other food groups. We've got 2 ways you can see to count carbohydrates. You can see that we've got carbohydrate choices, but based on serving, based on exchanges and exchange lists that are out there. The second way is carbohydrate grams. You can see that's a specific number of grams of carbohydrate per meal or snack. And so people can use either option here in their menu planning. And so one of the important things is that as it relates to fast food, to know how much carbohydrate are in the foods that we're choosing, and then to help in the regulation and control of our blood sugar from that point. We look at some carbohydrate amounts, and we just have a couple options here, a couple things to look at. From McDonald's, a quarter pounder's got 40 grams, small fries 30 grams, a Pepsi or a Coke is going to have about 42 grams. If we add that up, that's 112 grams of carbohydrates, which would equal out to about 7.5 carbohydrate exchanges or choices. If we modify a little bit, we have a quarter pounder, again, same 40 grams of carbohydrates. If we make a couple substitutions at the end here, if we have apple dippers instead of our fries, we've reduced by 22 grams. You can see from 30 grams in the small fries to 8 grams with our apple dippers. And then if we can get a diet soft drink, in this case we've got Diet Dr. Pepper listed, there's no grams of carbohydrate there. So we've cut that substantially. You can see we've cut by about a third, from 112 grams of carbohydrates to 48 grams, and then our choices or exchanges went from 7.5 down to 3. So we really made a good improvement with just some minor substitutions there. There's lots of other examples that you can use from these. What I recommend for people with diabetes is to check again the nutrition facts from the menu. use the internet. They've got the guides in the restaurants, and you can look at your favorite options and see how many carbohydrates they have, and then obviously you can make substitutions to potentially find some healthier options. So again, the planning and the preparation here, as well as the education, is an important first step to get us moving in the right direction with our regulation and control of our blood sugar. And so that's going to conclude this section of our fast food presentation, things we should know. Thank you again for joining us.